on Aging. Nancy, thank you for inviting me to be part of your series. It's very educational for the community, and I believe it's very much appreciated. I'm from this community. My name is Jeff Stillings. Pretty much born and raised in Rutland. I grew up in Rutland, and recently returned back to town after a 20-year or so hiatus. So just a real brief about myself. Went through the Naquag school system, graduated in 1985 from Wachusett. A couple of years later, I found myself on the West Boylston Police Department. I was there for about 6.5, 7 years. Around age 27, I got Yancey, figured I'd see what else was out there, and I joined the Border Patrol. Ended up on the Mexican-Texas border for a few years, and I picked up a canine. I was a dog handler. We worked traffic checkpoints from the main road that went from Laredo up to Houston, and that was an interesting experience in itself. So that took me until about 1998, and I ended up transferring. At the time, Border Patrol fell under Department of Justice, but it also answered to the INS, Immigration and Naturalization Service. So that was the uniform branch. So I had an opportunity to go into investigations within the INS, which is what I did. I was stationed in Clarksburg, West Virginia, stayed about 4 years there inside the FBI center where fingerprints, the National Crime Information Center was done, and I was the liaison, the INS liaison to the FBI. I was there for a few years. 9/11 happened, and that changed everything. We all remember what happened at 9/11 and the feelings of patriotism that were inside us at that time, and I decided I needed to get back into the game a little bit more, and I went back in the Border Patrol and was stationed in Niagara Falls, New York, on the Canadian border. I was there for a few months, and I also got picked up off a list to be a special agent with the INS, and they offered me a job in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. So I had to look at the map and see where Milwaukee was, and I said, okay, that sounds good, and I went out there, met my darling wife, Sally, here with us tonight, and I ended up staying 12 years in Milwaukee, so most of my career was out in the Midwest, and I enjoyed it a lot. I love Wisconsin. It was easy to make it there. So that was most of my experience, and I want to talk a little bit about how I fell into human trafficking as kind of an area of expertise through my job as an INS and later as an ICE agent. So in 2003, a lot of things happened. The INS merged with U.S. Customs, and we became the Department of Homeland Security. It's a relatively new agency, as you know. So we became ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement. And with that, a lot of changes, a lot of different laws that we suddenly were responsible for. There's about 400 different federal laws that my agency is responsible for. So after 12 years, well, I was a supervisor in Milwaukee, and after 12 years there, I put in for a job on the Canadian border, and I was picked up as the resident agent in charge for Houlton, Maine. And we went up there for a couple of years on the Canadian border. I really enjoyed that, working with the Canadian counterparts for ICE, HSI. About 3 years ago, I had the opportunity to come back home. This is my hometown, to run the Springfield office. So that's my current job. I'm the resident agent in charge for the Springfield Office of Homeland Security Investigations, a division of ICE. ICE has two parts. One is the deportation part that that's always in the headlines and the news you'll see. The second part is the investigative part, and that's HSI. That's who I'm with. So we have this little video here. I prefer video to me talking, and it kind of spells out the different missions that we have in ICE. More so than just the immigration, but human trafficking is one of the big strategic priorities. We do counterproliferation, which is weapons technology, intellectual property rights, which is your counterfeiting, your counterfeit property, stealing of different ideas, knockoffs from China or other countries, things of that nature. But here's a little snippet. Hopefully it publishes. Yep. There we go. So that's the agency in a nutshell. We're the investigative arm of DHS. Just as FBI is the investigative arm of the Department of Justice, we're the investigative arm of Homeland Security. That helps elaborate a little bit. As far as human trafficking goes, we're the leader in the global fight, because part of human trafficking, which I'm going to take a deeper dive into, is forced labor, which involves almost primarily foreign nationals. So we're the leader in the global fight on human trafficking efforts. So here we go. So the reason we're here tonight, as part of the 4-part series, talk about this segment of investigations that we do, human trafficking. Trafficking is divided into 2 parts. It's going to be sex trafficking, which is forcing an individual to do a commercial sex act. That's a prostitution act by force, fraud, or coercion, or in the case of a minor, just forcing a minor to do a commercial sex act. That's sex trafficking. For forced labor, forcing an individual, most often a foreign national, to conduct labor, any type of labor or services, by threats of force, fraud, coercion, threats of the legal process, fear of deportation, threatening to call immigration on somebody if they don't do X, Y, or Z, withholding of their documents so they don't go to a different company or department until they pay off a smuggling debt. And usually the trafficking is involved in other sorts of crimes, like a smuggling network, debt bondage, if you will. Citizenship is not an element of human trafficking. When we talk about sex trafficking, most often it is not foreign nationals that we're encountering. It's U.S. citizens. So we call that domestic trafficking. Just real briefly, some of the misperceptions that are out there. People get confused, smuggling and trafficking. Smuggling requires the crossing of a border. It's movement related. It's moving a person from another country into their final destination, the end destination, of which Massachusetts would be an end destination for smuggled aliens coming in here to work. It's transportation-based, it's movement, whereas trafficking is not. A trafficking victim does not wish to be a trafficking victim, but a smuggling person, although they may not be, ecstatic about it, they are hiring the services of a smuggler or a coyote to get them to the end destination. So there is a difference between smuggling and trafficking. They are not the same, but they're often confused, especially with the media. This was just a snippet from a big news story back in July, where you had all those aliens in Texas who died in the back of the trailer truck. You remember that? And it was reported as, this is a horrendous human trafficking crime. Absolutely a horrendous crime, but it's a human smuggling crime. It's not trafficking. Trafficking, we're talking about tonight. Smuggling, of course, ICE is the primary agency for investigating smuggling offenses. This is human smuggling, the secretion of individuals, the sneaking between ports of entry, crossing through the Maritimes, crossing through a land border, or whatnot. If you guys have any questions in the meantime, feel free to ask. Oh, ma'am.
When you say that the majority is national U.S. citizens, are you talking about the people that are being trafficked or the ones that are
Being trafficked.
And what is the nationality of the ones that are putting the trafficking together, that are actually coordinating it?
Are you talking about sex trafficking or forced labor?
Both.
So in forced labor, my experience since 2004 working in these have been very often people from the same country. And at the end of this presentation, I want to talk a little bit, a case study on a Philippine case that I had worked. It's a forced labor case where they held a maid for 2 decades, for 20 years, inside their house, and they were a pair of Filipino doctors. So the forced labor, and sometimes we see that with the massage parlor cases, they're often from the same country. Doesn't necessarily have to be that way, but that's what I'm seeing. When we talk about sex trafficking, domestic trafficking, we're usually seeing U.S. citizens. My offices are seeing U.S. citizens involved in the sex trafficking, both the pimps and the trafficking victims. Doesn't necessarily have to be that case, but that's what I'm seeing. So that's all I can speak to. Yeah. So I like my little videos. They're only a couple of minutes long. These all come from the Blue Campaign, which is like the flagship enterprise of human trafficking with Department of Homeland Security. If you go online, you can check Blue Campaign. They're all about outreaches, networking, information. All the flyers and the information you see here came from Blue Campaign, as did these training videos. A lot of these videos are geared towards police departments. And Chief, I have a whole bunch of them. If you have like a muster, or if you have you're just meeting up before a shift, these are only a couple of minutes long. We have them in a bunch of different categories. But this is about sex trafficking. We'll talk about that first. And this is a scenario about responding to a domestic call, a call for help on a domestic that actually should be looked at as a sex trafficking case. So take a look at the indicators, see what you can pick up, and we can have a discussion on whether the response was appropriate in this matter. Let's take a look. This is Rutland PD. Can we hear it?
Any weapons involved? Prior domestic call to that address. Good bid. Negative. No history of calls. Apartment A, Alpha, 228 Southwest 48th Street. In fact, we know it's part of the still Afghan. Party has not left A after entering. Unknown if any other parties are inside the address. Copy that. In route. Sir, we had a call about a domestic disturbance between a man and a woman in a parking lot right outside this apartment. Do you know anything about that? Were you involved in that?
There was nothing. Everything's fine.
You mind if I come in and look around?
No, come in, come in.
Are there any weapons?
No.
Any other people in the apartment?
Yes, yes. Maria, ven.
Have a seat, sir. I'm going to go clear the bedroom. All clear back here.
See? No problem.
Can one of you ladies explain what happened?
No hablo inglés oficial. Muy fine. Acordaste lo que tengo que decir.
Oh, Maria, you speak English. Can you help me translate?
Hey, ¿por qué tanto preguntas?
Calm down, sir. Calm down.
You guys sit down,
If
okay?
you don't calm down and be quiet, I'm going to have to put the cuffs on you. Now sit down. Tell me what's happened.
They don't speak no English.
Police, come in. Hey, I did a quick sweep earlier. Can you take a closer look back there?
strange going on here.
I know. Do you have any identification?
I have all the ID. Stand up, sir.
You see? All legal.
I'll go run these. Yeah, ask dispatch about the caller too, because we're not getting anything here. Have a seat, sir.
Yeah, but I'd still like to speak with the lady.
Allow me to translate.
I don't think so. Maria will translate. Ask them which one was arguing with him tonight.
Ok. Quiere saber quién está peleando, pero no se apure. No le voy a decir nada. No le voy a decir nada. No quiero que usted. Ya lo sé, no te apures. No le voy a decir nada. They said you're talking loud.
Ask them if he heard any of it.
No.
Something strange here, but everybody came back negative. The caller hung up before dispatch could identify.
My answer time. Something's going on here. I mean, something. We don't have anything. I don't think we've got probable cause of the crime act here.
Okay. All right, if nobody else has anything to say to us, we're going to write this up. So somebody's pressing charges. We're going to clear this as a disturbance. If we have to come out here again tonight, somebody's probably going to jail.
Maria, this is a brochure I'm leaving for you. Please translate it to the girls. It tells you what to do if things do get bad. Do you understand?
Eso.
So this is a somewhat realistic scenario that a Rutland Police Department might encounter. What we try to drive home is, in human trafficking situations, it doesn't, when you show up there, it doesn't scream, this is what you have, but as you start peeling away the different layers, the commonality is that something wrong is going on here. You hear that a lot. Something strange. I can't put my finger on it, but there is something not right that's going on here. And through the outreaches and the education and the training, we're trying to get these task forces developed to have an entity that police can call when they see something wrong, something's not right. Pick up the phone, call a representative of the task force. And the next case, which I want to talk about, was my office's case when I first started. The guys did a great job. So here's a situation where there was a woman in a West Springfield motel. She was in there doing prostitution. She was dropped off by the pimps, Milford and Tiana Lewis of Connecticut. They drop her off there, and she's doing prostitution. She wants to get out of there. They leave her there by herself. She escapes. She runs to the police department, asks for help. The officer there says, something strange is going on here. This woman was left inside the West Springfield motel. She's obviously in prostitution, involved in prostitution. She's in fear. She's asking for protection. Something strange is going on here. They reach out to the detective, who's a task force officer with us and also a member of our human trafficking task force, who reaches out to my office. They take it to the next level. They were able to set up a phone call to lure the couple up from Connecticut, where they were checking on their other workers, and they arrested them at a strip club when they got back into Springfield. But what they found out was that this husband and wife couple opened up what they called an entertainment service, where they were recruiting women in the Connecticut, Springfield area. They actually had them fill out an application. And they said, this is a talent agency. You're going to be a model. You're going to be doing some porn. You're going to be an escort. And you're going to do all things glamorous. You fill it out. And you had to sign some sort of a waiver acknowledging that if you try to leave the employment, you have to pay some sort of a service fee to leave. But what happened is, most all of the time, once the women started with the so-called talent agency, they were forced into prostitution through physical beatings, threats, etc., and that's what happened. So after she was rescued from the motel, the couple was arrested. We did a search warrant. We actually found a multitude of these applications that they filled out, which gave us the names of additional victims. And we were able to identify 8 victims of this scheme, which we used towards a prosecution, and they were just recently sentenced to 6 years for the wife and 12 years for the husband, federal time. So they're in jail. So that's a local case, or a Springfield case, of sex trafficking, pimping. I try to find something that might relate to who we are as a community, who we are as parents and grandparents. So here's a situation that could possibly hit home with one of us for if you have a tween or a teen child that could be entrapped into doing something online that they shouldn't be doing, okay? So let's take a look at this. It kind of scares me a little bit because we have a 14-year-old and she doesn't look up from her computer. She's got something in her hands at all times, or if she's not on the laptop, she's on her handheld, and her whole world, this generation's whole world, is internet-based, computer-based, device-based. And this is something that kind of hit home. Take a look at it and let's see what happens. It's only a couple minutes. To the wake call.
God, this is like camping. Oh, that's you alright. And this is you. No, how could I do that? Don't ask me. That is you. Oh, by the way, where is the money? Take it. Thank you, sir. Come on. You girls are not professionals. Professional what? Hookers, prostitutes, hoes, whatever you want to call it. Alright, on your feet, you can get cleaned up the end of the party tonight. Are you crazy? We're not going anywhere with you. Ever. Oh, you'll go. Or these photos will end up online. Oh, yeah. It'll be all over the internet. So you'll do what I tell you to do. I only know.
We're seeing some with online complaints where people are fishing. They're out there trying to report themselves as a fellow teenager, and they get them through trickery or whatnot to give them some sort of a lewd photograph, and then from there, the blackmail. Hey, you have to keep doing X, Y, and Z, otherwise I'm going to share this with everybody in your Facebook friends. So, questions on sex trafficking in a nutshell? Ask away.
There are communities, I believe, in the United States where prostitution is legal, and I'm wondering if in those areas, if human trafficking is less than
Yeah, like in
the
Vegas.
general population.
I can't speak to that. My gut instinct is that it's separate. It's a different topic than what we're talking about here with the pimping and the coercion and the trickery, things like that. So that's prostitution, which is not in itself human trafficking. The trafficking aspect is the pimping. It's the trickery and the forcing them to do that. So that is a very good question. So, but I don't think I'm qualified to answer that. Sorry.
No problem.
So forced labor is my thing, and that's what we're going to talk about right now. And that's let's just have another great little muster video. There's a in forced labor, yes, we see it in forced labor. It can happen to males, of course, in sex trafficking, but the percentage is so low. I'm talking maybe less than 1%, but it does happen. But in forced labor, it could be anything. So in this situation, we see a vulnerable person, a foreign national, probably not here with papers. His documents are withheld. We also saw that in the sex trafficking scenario. Withholding of a document is a huge, huge red flag. So, you know, if us or officers encounter somebody and you ask them for identification, we all have everybody in here has some form of identification on them, I guarantee it, right? You didn't come here. You didn't leave your house without an ID or your driver's license. That's our identity. That is our permission. That's our hall pass to move about the country. To withhold a document, specifically a passport for a foreign national, it completely controls them psychologically and also physically, because you cannot board an international plane without a passport. If you withhold their foreign passport, that's their escape ticket to go back home. So if we encounter somebody, especially a laborer, and they say, my boss has my documents, that's a huge flag, that's a huge indicator that we need to take a deeper look in there. Why does that person have those documents? And in most states who have a trafficking provision, the withholding of an identity document is a state charge. With the feds, withholding someone's identity documents is a lesser included of human trafficking if it's involved with human trafficking. So, if that makes any sense. So here's a quick training video of a traffic stop. There you go.
Where are you from? El Salvador.
You have your immigration document? You speak English? ¿Tienes tu documento?
No, the boss has it. The boss takes my passport.
Is that the boss?
No,
Sir, do you have any ID, driver's license?
the boss is my pay.
You mean you keep your pay?
He tells till I pay off my debt.
How long have you been paying off your debt?
More than a year now.
Sir, where do you work? Where do you live? Sir, you need to answer my question.
That's a reason for the whole conversation here. Debt bondage. It's something that we don't see every day, or it's not in our consciousness, but it's very much at the forefront of a foreign national who didn't get here legally, who didn't come here with a visa. If they had to come here through a smuggling organization, especially from Asia, where it may cost 20, 30, 40,000 US dollars to pay the Chinese triad to work their way out here, they incur a lot of smuggling debt that does not go away. The collateral to those debt, specifically with Asian people, the collateral is most often their family members, or the safety of their family members back in their home country. So that weighs heavy on them. The closer we get to the United States, maybe the smaller the smuggling fee. For example, Mexican nationals, the average smuggling fee, I believe, is $3,000 to $7,000 to cross the border. But it is not uncommon to see a $30,000, $40,000, or even $60,000 smuggling debt I've seen with Indian nationals, people from India, to come over here. So that's heavy, and those debts don't go away. So the withholding of the documents, as I discussed, keeps them grounded here, keeps them working, and a large portion of their wages are being trickled back to that, and it's organized crime, either the Chinese triad, some sort of organized cartel smuggling organization. So that's kind of the premise behind a forced labor coercion, keeping somebody indentured servitude. So questions on forced labor? No? Okay. We're doing good. I promise that I'll keep this to within an hour in here. So here's a case study story on how I became involved in human trafficking. So this is the story of a woman named Irma. Irma's story began in 1985. I was just getting out of high school. Irma was 18 years old, the eldest of 9 children living in southern Philippines. Her family were rice farmers. They didn't own any land, but they leased paddies to farm the rice. The father worked for the highway department. Not like the highway department here. He worked for 50 cents a day digging sewer ditches in southern Philippines. They lived literally in a concrete structure with a grass roof, and there were 9 children. So you have to take kind of a step back and recognize what we take for granted here in the United States. We take for granted that we live in a free country, first of all, and that we have the basics. We have shelter, things like that. We have electricity. Food is guaranteed. You don't see anybody dying of starvation in the obituaries in America. You just don't see that. But in third world countries, that is a real possibility. So when you're the eldest of 9 children, you're 18 years old, it's time to move you out. Time to move you out of the hut, literally, get you into the international workforce, and start bringing some money back to the family in southern Philippines. So that's where her story begins. At 18 years old, I said, listen, this is what we're going to do. At the time, she was working for $100 a month for a pair of doctors in southern Philippines. The pair of doctors said, and their name was Mendoza, and they said, hey, we have children in Wisconsin. She's a doctor. She's married to a doctor. They have 3 kids. How about you go to Wisconsin? We'll create a reason for you to get a visa. I'll say I'm going for an eye exam. You can come as my servant, get a tourist visa. You'll overstay your visa. You'll go work for them as a nanny. You're going to work for about 5 years. You'll get the $100 a month, room and board, live in this nice palatial house. You can see it on the lower right there. cook and clean for the kids, it'll be fun, 5-year adventure, then you come back, right? She goes, sign me up. But the father and the mother said, who would listen to me if she doesn't come back or if we lose touch with her? So they didn't have all the savvy of the legal process, but they knew enough to get something in writing from the Mendozas saying, hey, you're going to take my daughter for 5 years. This is kind of a promise, and she's going to come back. So they had that in writing for what that was worth. So almost immediately after coming to Wisconsin, she realizes that there are rules that she didn't expect. And the rules are that she can't go outside and she can't be seen. But she still has to wash the car. She has to change the oil. That all has to be done inside the garage with the garage closed. She's like, well, I'm the nanny. Let me go to the park. Let me go walk the dog. Let me go out. No, 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 no. You can't do that, honey, because what you got to understand is in America, you're illegal. You're an illegal alien. Okay, and what happens in America to people who don't have status is you get incarcerated. You go to one of America's worst prisons, okay, and you get deported. In the meantime, your family is not going to get the money that they expect, that they need to survive, okay? So these are the rules. Now, I understand you want to go to church. If you want to go to church, it'll be the church of our choice. You have to get in the back seat of the car and you have to lay down because you can't be seen because the police are looking for you. These guys right here are looking for you. Okay, she's 18 years old. We look at it now as, you know, mature U.S. citizens, and we're like, that's ridiculous. But you have to take a step back and realize what somebody from the southern Philippines, impoverished, not knowing what the so-called adventure that they're getting into. So she realizes that she came here with a tourist visa, which was still valid. What did they do? Immediately take it. Let me hold on to this for you. This is very valuable. Me take this for you. In the meantime, what we're going to do is this whopping $100 that you're earning, we're going to put that into a bank account. And who controls the bank account? The mother doctor. Okay? So what we find out, just fast forward the story a little bit, we realize that the bank account closed the day after her tourist visa permission expired in there. No sense paying her, right, now that you're illegal. So throughout the years, 1 year turned to 2, 2 to 3, she's constantly told that the rules are different for people who don't have status. The rules are different for somebody who's a servant. She's not allowed to eat at the table with the family. She can eat the scraps that's in the kitchen after the fact. She's not allowed to go shopping, but maybe once a year, and that's going to come out of your pay. The money's going into this mysterious account that she can't access, nor does she really know how much is in there. In the meantime, some letters are trickling back and forth between her mother and the parents. And the parents aren't Julian Ward Cleaver, okay? Like I said, they're in a different situation where they kind of pushed her out. And the parents are writing like, hey, how's the adventure? By the way, where's this money that's you're supposed to be earning? And we're not really seeing anything. You know, can you help us out a little bit? And so what the good doctors are saying is, well, you got to understand the rules of the United States. If you have $100 in the bank and you want to take money out, well, U.S. government taxes that 50%. Now, if you want to take your $50 now and you want to mail that overseas, the Postal Service taxes 50%. So that's only 25 bucks. It's best that you just keep working for a while, all right, to build it up because the tax is so heavy. She says, okay, she met another maid of the Wisconsin doctors' siblings were also doctors. They were down in Illinois, and they had a maid. And they compared notes, and that maid was actually able to get a green card. So she's like, well, why can't I get a green card like her? So we're working on it. We're working on it over the years. It's actually on George Bush's desk right now waiting for signature. It would be kind of like, that's ludicrous, but in her mindset over the years, there's despair, and you can see that in the letters that she wrote back home. Like, hey, listen, I'm losing hope, kind of giving up here. I just want to go home, but I can't go home because I'm not saving enough money for the plane ticket back. It's thousands of dollars for a plane ticket. All my expenses are really starting to add up. I didn't realize that I had to buy my own toiletries. I didn't realize it was so expensive to send money back to you. I was able to save up and buy this nice sweater for you, Dad, that as a Christmas gift. So the next time that the family from the Philippines comes out to visit, I'm going to give them the sweater to bring back to you. Fast forward the story a little bit, they get the sweater and they open it up, and it's some rancid, dirty filthy sweater that somebody pulled out of the dumpster. They took the real sweater that she had bought, swapped it out with something from the garbage, threw it in there and said, here, give this back to the parents back in the Philippines. In there. So, that's what's going on. Years turned to decades. The kids grew up. Kids actually grew up. One of them got married. Now, the whole while, she was the maid. Nobody knew that she was in this house. Of all the friends that would come to visit, they never saw her in there because she's in the basement of the finished basement of their mansion. She had her bedroom, which is right there, in there. They would have parties downstairs. She would be hiding in the bedroom. After we took her out of the house, we were able to identify who their closest friends were, and we interviewed them. None of them knew that she was there, and we asked them to draw a schematic of the basement in there. And they would draw, it was rectangular in shape, but when they got to that one corner, they couldn't figure out what was there because it never made sense. They never thought about it, but the buffet table was always pushed up against it, and that's where the food was. She was behind the door. So after the party got out, knock on the door, all right, honey, time to get up and start cleaning. You got to start cleaning because you got to start work again at 6 in the morning. So she worked every day, 365 days a year, 6 in the morning until approximately 11 o'clock at night, at their beck and call, getting them muffins, doing her hair a couple times a day, doing the mother's hair a few times a day, for 19 years. For 19 years. She didn't know what to do. What do? You don't have your passport. You don't even have a telephone. The parents certainly didn't have a telephone down in the southern Philippines. She can't go to the police because she had been brainwashed for 20 years, all the way from her youth, to thinking that the police are out to get you, that immigration is certainly out to get you, and these are the consequences if you come forward. You're no longer going to be able to provide for your family. So that's per Irma. This is what happens in 2004. Somebody picks up the HSI tip line, or the ICE tip line, calls it in, saying, there's a woman living in the basement of these 2 doctors, and she's not free to come and go. She's not free to leave. That got generated into a tip line lead that gets sent to the Milwaukee office, and my boss looked at it, and that was the buzzword. We get leads. The tip line gets about 70,000 tips a year, and they're located in Burlington, Vermont. And not every one of them obviously can be acted upon, but this one line saying not free to come and go was enough for my boss to say, hey, listen, Jeff, take a closer look to see if there's anything to this. So we started to look. There weren't any records of her being there. Checked with the mail, with the post office. There was nothing with the post office that she received mail. And we come to find out that for her to send letters to and from home had to be in a 2-envelope system. She wrote the letter, went into an envelope, and went to their family in the Philippines. They would censor it, of course, and if it was something that they felt like sharing, the mother would get the letter. If it wasn't, it would go right in the trash. She estimated that there was hundreds and hundreds of letters that she wrote over the years. We found out that the mother saved every letter that she got. There was 77 letters, which told the story of the decades leading up to her rescue. So the tip line comes in and says, hey, there's a woman who's not free to come and go. We start looking at it and realize that there's a little bit of veracity to the claim that we can't verify her existence in there. We apply, we get a search warrant. The search warrant is looking for the person of Irma, somebody who is likely here without documentation, and we're only asking the judge's permission to go in and find her. So this is 2004. Back it up a little bit about the topic of tonight, human trafficking. The human trafficking law only began in the year 2000. Prior to that, it was civil rights violations or slavery, but human trafficking itself, the Trafficking Victim Protection Act, was only born in 2000. So there had not been a test case of forced labor since the enaction of that law, the federal law. So 2004, this tip comes in. So we're looking at it as a possible first case in the nation. So the time comes, we get a search warrant, we show up, and this time we've become ICE. Went from INS to ICE. So this was like the first instance where we actually knocked and announced ourselves as the Department of Homeland Security. We had worked jointly with the FBI on the trafficking task force out there, so it was a joint effort with FBI and DHS. Knock on the door, waited about 4 minutes. The mother doctor comes to the door and said, you know, federal agents, we have a search warrant. She's like, no, okay, we're here for the maid. She's in the basement. Okay. So we walked down to the basement where she is said to be held, and the tip said that she stays in a wine cellar that she's using as a bedroom. So the operation was called Operation Wine Cellar. So my partner Mike and I were down in the basement. The other agents fanned out throughout the house looking for her, but we had a pretty good idea we're going to find her in the basement. So we go in the basement. It's furnished just like they say. We look over and there's a wine cellar in there, but there's no Irma inside there. So okay, well here's the wine cellar. She's not here. Then we look and we see the two doors right there. We open up one of the doors and there's a bedroom, just a single bed in this little corner room. We're like, Irma, we're here to help you. Are you here? We're here to help you. And it's dark and it's cold and it's gloomy. So we get the flashlights on. Walk into the bedroom, Irma's not there. And then in the corner, we see this little closet, lower left. We open the door real slow, and there's Irma. She's in a bathrobe, and she's crouched down, and she's shaking. And I've never seen anyone so scared. And she's just looking up at the federal agents that she had been told for 2 decades are going to come and get you. They're going to imprison you. They're going to deport you. And this day had come that the mother doctor had come down and said, this is what I've been warning you about, that the federales are here. They're going to take you. And she was just couldn't stand. She was scared to death. And that's when it ended. She said, come on, let's get you out of here. It's over. We took her out of there. We had a victim witness coordinator because we knew we were going to be dealing with a victim. Separated ourselves, got the victim witness coordinator involved from the U.S. Attorney's Office, got her clothes, grabbed some clothes, and boogied her out of there to the U.S. Attorney. And that's kind of where the case began, with the debriefing of her, and that's when we find out all the horrendous things that had happened over 20 years. Fast forward, you try to put a couple of doctors in jail. It's expensive. They've got the money for a legal defense. Everything was tested. I couldn't be more proud of the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Eastern District of Wisconsin and the Civil Rights Division of Maine Justice. When there's a civil rights case, we're now a human trafficking case, the Department of Justice in Washington, D.C. has a specialized unit that deals with that. They send a co-prosecutor out. And I learned everything there is about human trafficking from this one prosecutor on how to do things. And all I did, because we didn't know it was a brand new, first case ever. I just followed her instructions, and boom, 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 who to interview. We did a second search warrant. We were able to find a phone book of the Philippine Medical Association of Milwaukee, open it up. It actually had all their best friends' names in there. That was our witness list for grand jury and for the trial. We found all these doctors who said, yeah, I'm the godfather, I'm the godmother of their children. I've never seen this woman before. So we had harboring, we had secreting of her, we had trafficking, we had forced labor trafficking. Fast forward, it went to trial, full-blown jury trial, guilty on all counts. There was no sentencing guideline, there was no sentencing to base it on because there had been no cases before, but the guidelines, the way Congress had intended, said it should be about 65 years in prison for forced labor trafficking. The judge gave 4 years for the first case. That went up on appeal. They appealed, and Maine Justice said, we appeal also because that is not what Congress had intended with the guidelines. I think 4 years is too light. So the Seventh Circuit kicked it back to the district court judge and said, resentence. So the district court judge resentenced for 6 years. So they served 6 years. Here's an interesting tidbit. The doctors, also from the Philippines, were lawful permanent residents. They never naturalized. They never became U.S. citizens. So what happens when you get convicted of forced labor? Forced labor, yeah, you got it. Forced labor is what we call an aggravated felony. That is a deportable offense. So they served their 6 years, and on the day that they were released, ICE was there to take them. We physically took them. We had already had their hearing while they were serving their time. They were deported back to the Philippines, and they were actually repatriated via plane right after that. So it's kind of a Cinderella story, although the poor Irma will never get those 20 years back.
Now, what happened to Irma?
Good question. So if you look at the pamphlets right here, it talks about victims of crime. So Congress in the TVPA had enacted some relief for victims of human trafficking. And one of the reliefs is a T visa. It's a trafficking visa, which leads to a green card. So she gets status as a victim of trafficking.
So she didn't get deported, just.
Of course not. No, that's correct. So she's eligible.
Those lies those people told her.
That's right. That's right. And they actually reverse roles because she got the green card and they got deported. Yeah. So it's more, the story is more complex with that, with the legal issues and how we went about it, how we used the grand jury. Two of the children were granted immunity from the Attorney General. And why would we grant immunity? It's so they can't plead the fifth. And then we could call them, we could subpoena them to testify on the story of the 20 years and how this went about. So we ended up using one of the children to tell the story of what happened inside the walls and of the rules.
Did they say?
Yep. Oh yeah. Yep. Yep. You know, it wasn't comfortable to testify against your parents, but just a little legal trivia. You have privilege against your spouse, right? So I don't have to testify against my wife, but you don't have a privilege against not testifying against your parent or your child in there. So, so that's the story of that. In a nutshell, there's a lot more to it, but that was my indoctrination to human trafficking, and that happened in 2004. The trial went in 2006. The appeals and their release, we're talking almost 2009, maybe 2010, when they got deported. So it was a while ago, but not so much a while ago. Ma'am?
If nobody saw Irma, how did this tipster find her?
The tip,
Report the tip.
the kids grew up and got married. The kids grew up and got married. They had to share the secret, family secret.
No, I meant way back when.
Who was the tipster?
Who was the tipster? How did that tipster see her if nobody saw her?
A bride of the kid.
Okay, so a spouse. someone-
Spouse. They grew up,
One of the children.
yeah, they had to share the secret. The secret had to be shared, and somebody from the outside looking in said, something's wrong. Very common thing. Something very wrong is going on here, right? Why can't this woman sit next to me and share a meal? Why is this, why that? You know, why did you introduce her as the aunt? And now I'm hearing the toilet flush downstairs and realize that she lives down there. Yes. Yeah, yep. The Trafficking Victim Protection Act mandates restitution. So without going into the amounts, but we actually had to show through Department of Labor experts, what the Fair Labor Standards Act would be for an individual in a domestic capacity working 365, 7 days a week for this type of job, cooking and cleaning, changing the oil, cleaning the medical instruments for the doctors. All these different duties had a wage with Department of Labor, and we had to come up with a figure for restitution. And then there was a civil remedy in there, but yeah, we don't talk about that too much. But yeah, but not every trafficking case has justice like that, because a lot of them don't have those facts to it, especially in the trafficking of sex trafficking. It's not always the same result in there financially. So that's the story of forced labor. Other things that we see in Springfield, what I call matters in between. Your massage parlor, your razor massage parlor, they pop up here and there. They like to pop up near interstates, and we get a lot of calls, a lot of tips about those type of establishments. This one here is one we shut down last November. Lower right, you can see it's a kid's ice cream parlor. You get some tables, sit outside, and the picnic tables. And the left is a coffee shop, and upstairs is an Asian massage parlor. So the complaints were coming in like you got all these guys coming at all hours of the night, parking, going upstairs, and a lot of times the consistency of the tips are that they might see Asian females go inside, especially in like a strip mall or some sort of a mall setting, but they don't see them leave. So the indications are that they're sleeping there overnight. And we take a deeper look into those type of situations, and oftentimes, more often than not, they're dropped off there food, they might have so much food, but they don't have transportation coming, again, control. So we look into those matters, we do a lot of vetting. Some of the vetting questions are right there, you know, where are your documents? Who has control of your documents? Are you free to come and go? Are you free to contact family? Can you go to church? Do you have a smuggling debt? Are you paying off any type of debt to triads or organized crime, things like that? Depending on the situation there is how we proceed. So we do a lot of vetting. We do a lot of cooperation with the local police if there's a prostitution ring going on inside there. And oftentimes we find that it's, in my experience, you would think that you're going about it as a sex trafficking investigation, but what we're finding is it's actually a forced labor investigation because they are paying off some sort of a debt. And they're doing so willfully, but they're doing it because they're not making the money at a buffet or a restaurant, so therefore they have to do massage parlor type work to pay off the debt quicker through pressure. So very complex, difficult cases to investigate because a lot of people don't want to come forward and just come clean and explain what's going on. They have a lot to lose about coming clean and therefore being placed in removal proceedings or sent back home. Cost them everything they had, and probably everything that their family had for them to come over here to America to do that. You know, they got a lot to lose. So that's what I call matters in between that we see a lot of. We see a lot of buffet cases. This here was a stash house we worked in Wisconsin, where they were all living in the same house. The van would pull up, take them to the different locations. We were able to work that as a hiring case, and able to seize the house. So those are good cases to work, but it's more of a forced labor than sex trafficking. And I think that's going to take me near the end. Oop, just about 1 hour. Just some quick stats in there. You know, people ask about how often do we rescue a victim? A little over 1 a day. About 4,000 investigations, a couple thousand arrests per year. Just my agency. Almost 600 convictions. Human trafficking. It's a big deal with my agency. It's the #2 strategic priority next to terrorism. So that's where I'm coming from with human trafficking, and I hope it was, Nancy, you had a question?
Yeah, I'm just wondering, when this whole opioid crisis, are you seeing or do you anticipate, you know, you've got these people who are in crisis, they've lost every connection they have, they've lost every branch.
Yep,
So they have no money and maybe some of the sources that they're getting drugs from,
that's right.
some kind of entrapment.
Yep. Yep, we see that. Yep, we see it in both forced labor and sex trafficking. In the prostitution, they're using that as their monetary reward for their daily fix, and that's the courts have held that is a source of force, control. Yep, trying to get your fix. The civil rights attorney that taught me everything about trafficking, she was working a nice case in Florida where the migrant workers were, at the end of their day, were given so much, you know, opioid, you know, with their meals and things like that, and it forced an addiction in there that kept them compelled. Yep. So, yeah. So I think there is an element that you see. There's always a drug element in the sex trafficking, most always, some sort of a connection there. So, yeah. Any other questions in there? So I hope this. Go ahead, ma'am.
The terrorism that you got, I wasn't sure, does that also include people in the United States that are finding ways to get hooked into ISIS? That's part of your domain too, correct?
The Joint Terrorism Task Force is the primary entity for terrorism. We are a partner with the JTTF. So when you talk about domestically, so that would be the proper entity for terrorism. We have an international footprint, which we should talk about. Domestically, we have about 212 HSI offices. I have one office at Springfield. Internationally, I think we're at 69 attaché offices in 69 different countries in there. So that's our international footprint. So they are actively working with the intel community and the FBI, who might also have an attaché. They work out of the embassies and things like that. So That's an active part of what we do. We're an international agency. We're a border agency. So most any case that has a border nexus, we can touch. That kind of.
You guys are paid by the federal government.
Yeah, we're the Department of Homeland Security. So, yep, it's a federal agency. Yep. And under DHS, you have TSA. We all know TSA, the screeners. You have ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement. Under ICE, you have enforcement removal operations, which are doing your administrative arrests and jail checks and things like that. And then we have HSI, which is where my world is. So, thank you. Well, any other questions before we wrap up? So hopefully we didn't keep you guys too late. And thank you for including me in part of your is it 4 parts? 4 parts?
It's gonna keep going.
All right.
Anyone else who would like to speak?
Well, let's talk after on, that's, maybe there's somebody in my office or in the Boston office that, and we do 400 different laws. So, you've got internet crimes, cyber crimes, weapons technology, counterproliferation, intellectual property rights. That's always kind of interesting, the flea market stuff and things like that. That might be of interest to you. But let's talk after and see what we can do. Chief, you had a...
See a geographical area that your office covers.
The 4 western counties.
Okay.
So
Here we're covered by Boston.
yeah, but you got me on speed dial. Yeah, you can call me anytime. So the special agent in charge, Boston, covers all of New England. There's 10 resident agent in charge, called RAC offices, scattered throughout New England. I have Western Massachusetts. Boston covers Worcester County, East, and every state has at least 1 or 2 offices. And there, Maine has 3 offices. They have an office in Portland, Bangor, and Holton. Each office was different. When I was in Holton, the duties up there were completely different than what I do in Springfield and completely different than what they do in the southern part of Maine. All the jobs up there were almost specifically all liaison related with the Canadian counterparts, the RCMP, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, and Canada Border Services and things like that, U.S. Border Patrol. So it was an interesting dynamic up there compared to the different other offices. Each office is different. Each office is a different job. So I love it. I'm retirement eligible, but I'm sticking around because I like it. A couple more years.
I know I didn't look at the information, but is there information on that line? Like people,
There is. Yeah, grab one of those wallet cards in there. It's 1-866-DHS, the number 2 ICE, 1-866-DHS-2 ICE. And we also have a public service announcement on a disc that I gave to Mr. Mattson. And he's going to take a look at it, and hopefully he can feed that into your cable channel as part of, I know you guys like looking at the postcards of the old Muskapog Hotel and things like that, but maybe if we can sneak a PSA in the middle of it, it just shows an awareness, and that's pretty much, we're not saying that there's a trafficking problem in Rutland, but it's an awareness of what's going on in the world today, certainly in our country in there. Sir?
With this forced labor business that's going on, we have all this imported labor at apple picking time, for instance.
Yeah.
Is that predominantly on the up and up, or is it problems with that also?
I think it is on the up and up. I think what you're probably referring to is the H-2B program. So, Department of Labor and the Department of State are also involved in the immigration business, if you will. It's actually the State Department that issues the visas to come here. And there's probably 100 different categories of visa. You need a reason to come to the United States. You can't just say, I want to come. But one of the reasons is, under the H-2B, it could be like an agricultural visa, saying that, hey, we have all these apples to pick. We have all this agriculture, farm work, but we can't get U.S. citizens to fill that. So they can petition the Department of Labor and try to get visas to come in here and do that specific job. So when I was in Maine, it's a big forestry. A lot of they cut down the trees, but they also have to, for every tree they cut, they have to plant. So they would actually, under this, it was either an H-2B or the J program, an exchange visitor program. So they would actually recruit, and they all came from a couple of villages in Honduras. So, and that's what this contracting company, so they would get all this labor down in Honduras, apply for the proper visas, bring them up to harvest the forestry for like Irving Forestry up there. Then when the season's over, fly them back, and that would pretty much be the year's income, you know, to work 4 months under that visa program. You see that a lot with the tourist industries. If you go to a lot of your resorts, you might see kids from Eastern European. If you go look at the lifeguards at most of your resort hotels, they're going to be some college aged person who's here during their summer break, and they're usually here under a J visa. It's a cultural exchange program that says, hey, you're from XYZ country, come to America. America's the greatest country in the world. We want to teach you what makes us tick, right? Culture. Learn our culture, be our culture, take it back to your own country, make your own country better. That's what the J program is. Now, for the most part, that's how it works. But the world is full of greed, and that's what we saw with the case of the maid. It was all through greed, that they wanted to control her, they didn't want to pay her, they felt entitled to have a maid. They felt entitled to have a servant. And that's how it may be in certain parts of the world, but now they come to America and they try to take that mindset, and it doesn't fly in there, thus the trickery. So with the J's, we've had situations where something wrong was going on here. Street cop would get a call, they showed up at these roadside motels, saw that 5 people were sleeping on a bed. Five people to a bed. Something weird was going on. They had my business card in the drawer, called me up and said, what do you think? We go up there and find out they were kids from all different countries. They were from Turkey, Eastern European, Asia countries, and they were here under this program. But what they thought, they were just going to come over here, work at a nice resort. I won't say the name of it, but a very nice resort. And of course, they don't put them up at the resort. They put them up at the roadsides down the road. What they thought they were going to make money, they realized this isn't the case because they had to pay a fee for the contracting company that set them up to get the J visa. They had to pay rent, they had to pay food, they had to pay for transportation to and from. So the $100 a week that they thought they were making, suddenly they find out that they have $90 in expenses, and so it begins. Again, debt bondage. So we've had situations where we've did the vetting, find out what was going on, and this is a good way to end the story. So we found out that they were being mistreated. They were run by a company out of California. Picked up the phone and says, I'm about ready to shut down your visa service. Put a lookout in there that you guys are involved in forced labor trafficking. And they hopped on a red-eye plane. They flew out here because this was their bread and butter. They had these contracts all over the country for J workers in there. And they didn't realize that this was going on this part because they tried to cut corners and just have the local landlord who owned the roadside motels kind of take care of things. They say, what's the harm? Hey, can you put these kids up? Can you drive them to and from work? Can you take them to the grocery store, etc.? But what they didn't know, they didn't vet the owner of the roadside motel, and he became abusive to them. And actually, one of them was savvy enough to push record on that. I won't play it because it'll disrupt your cable TV with all the F-bombs and things like that. But they actually pushed record, and they recorded this guy making the threats, pushing them around, trying to entice them into a fight, things like that. So we were able to put an end to that. And after we got them back on track with the right place, getting them in proper settings, they were able to resume their J program at the resort. And these were sharp kids. These were smart college kids. They were going to come out here and get the experience. And what was their experience after the summer? That greed takes place, exploitation takes place. People will take advantage of you if they can. But in the end, we checked on them through the summer, make sure they were doing good. When it was time for them to go back, they gave me this little token. And the token, and I keep it, if you look at my office in Springfield, I got a lot of knickknacks. I collect badges, I got patches and things like that, and the challenge coins. But next to it, I have this little monk. It's just a little good luck symbol, and he's holding a baseball bat. And one of the girls gave it to me, and she said, hey, this guy's called the Guardian. Before we left on this adventure, my parents gave this to me, and he said, he'll watch over you when you're out there, by the proud parents. And he did. And I'd like to give that to you. And she gave it because you're the guardian. And one thing that we learned from this adventure, from this exchange, is that in America, you can pick up the phone and you can call 911, and a good guy will come, 100% of the time in America, and we don't always have that in Russia. I can call 911, and the good guys will come every time, and I can explain to the good guys that something wrong is going on here, and someone's going to look after us. That's what they took back after their summer exchange. So I keep that little guy with me. It means more to me than any of the little medals that I have, and that's part of the reason why I do what I do too with the human trafficking. So I had no idea what human trafficking was when the tip came to me, but it's become me. So that's kind of what I've become after all these years, 30 years in law enforcement now. So I wouldn't have it any other way. So good way to end. All right. Thank you very much. Let's have a talk on what else we can do for you, HSI. I encourage you to take a look at the pamphlets. If anybody else has any questions, reach out. The tip line is there. And I look